friends, happy Sunday evening to you. We're here to give you an update on Hurricane Dorian, one of the most powerful hurricanes in the Atlantic in history. It's actually number 2 to Hurricane Allen that was back in 1980, I believe, where Allen had 190 mile an hour winds. This is at 185, and it looks extremely impressive here on satellite imagery. Nick is giving you a real close-up view here as it's going through the northwest Bahamas. And I've been watching it closely just right in the big monitor. Seems like it might have taken a slight jog back to the left again, so it's definitely clearly going due west as opposed to making the expected right-hand turn. It's getting dangerously close to Florida. Certainly the outflow from the storm is already producing some cloud cover on the east coast. We'll take it in a little bit closer here, and you'll get a real good shot of that eye. A lot of equalization around the storm. It's very concentric, so we've got these storms firing up on both sides of the actual hurricane, and it's very well defined, a clear eye going right across the northwest Bahamas and headed towards Freeport right now. It's right on the doorstep of Freeport, Grand Bahama Island. Maximum sustained winds again 185 miles an hour. The storm surge expected to be anywhere from 20 to 25 feet here above the normal tide, and that's combined with, of course, the tremendous amount of rain that is falling right around the center of the storm. We get those real good shots of convection and tremendous amounts of rain, these waves that are coming in on the eye wall as it begins to approach. Now we're going to see what we refer to as eye wall replacement cycles. When storms become this intense, they usually go through these replacement cycles. So the eye wall breaks down and a new one forms. Sometimes that can lead to a little bit of weakening. What's been amazing today is these maximum sustained winds have stayed at 185 miles an hour through the afternoon into the evening. Even this morning it was 180. So this has been tremendous for such a long period of time. And we still expect it to potentially maintain near the same strength overnight tonight. Hurricane centers bring it down to about 180, and then in the morning probably weakening it a little bit more as it continues to march to the west. But weakening is a relative term when you're talking about such a monster storm such as Dorian. The track to the west is expected to continue here. Notice how it's really slowed down. You can really see that on the satellite imagery. It's moving along and then all of a sudden starts putting on the brakes. That is probably an indication that it's about to nearly stall and then maybe make that hook to the right that most of our models have been suggesting. Here's a visible shot, and that's literally the natural light, sunlight. That's why it kind of fades away here as we lose the sunlight, but really you can follow the eye's progress really well on the visible imagery right through the northwest Bahamas. Tracy Sears was asking me about Nassau earlier. A lot of folks, of course, know Nassau in the Bahamas. That's down here. So they're more towards the central Bahamas. It's the northwest Bahamas that are really taking a pounding. Not to say there's not something going on down here, but it's not nearly as bad as what we're seeing in the Abaco Island area and back over towards Grand Bahama Island, heading, unfortunately, towards Florida. This is going to be a very close call, and it's certainly, they are not out of the danger area just yet. And this is a hurricane warning that's in effect for much of the east coast or central east coast of Florida. The orange is a tropical storm warning just south of Palm Beach, and you go north and up towards Daytona, that red area is actually a hurricane watch. So the pink is the hurricane warning, of course, for the northwest Bahamas and then the central coast of Florida. It's just such a close call at this point. Storm is within 36 hours from impacting this area, so the Hurricane Center had to make a call, and even if it turns a little bit to the right, they may still experience marginal hurricane force winds. And of course, if anything changes with this track and it ends up going a little closer to the coast, it's going to be a much more serious situation. So that's why we have the hurricane warning that's currently in effect. Here are the stats. There you go, Category 5 right now. 185 mile an hour winds, moving to the west at 5. And this was the 8 o'clock advisory, so 60 miles east of Freeport. And I think it's obviously a little bit closer than that right now. But with moving at only 5 miles an hour, it's taking its time going through. And so Grand Bahama Island is in for a prolonged period tonight into tomorrow of tremendous wind and also, of course, the rain. Here's the forecast track, taking it through time, and this is off a little bit because it's just updated a little bit. But we see Category 4 status even as it comes close to Florida. And notice how it just kind of parallels the Florida coast. This is a close call, folks, and the cone of uncertainty extends back along the coast of Florida from Palm Beach, just north of Palm Beach, all the way up towards the St. Augustine and Jacksonville area, and then Savannah, Georgia. We've got Charleston, South Carolina, pretty much almost a bullseye here if you continue that track. But watch what happens here. It pulls just east of the coast by the Hurricane Center forecast track. Now this is the cone of possibilities, and it's important to realize that we still have landfall as a possibility. It's not the most likely scenario, but it's still a possibility, and that's why we're really on guard here from Florida all the way up through the Carolina coast. And the center of this track actually takes it over the outer banks of North Carolina, and I always like to take this line off because really when you take the line off, you see the wide range of possibilities. Obviously the center is the best bet, but any of these areas is a possibility. It still would be a Category 2 and then 1 off the coast of Virginia. This would bring us some impact in central and eastern Virginia, rain and even some wind. Here's the spaghetti plot of models, and some of this is actually new. I'm looking at it for the first time. Notice here there's been a little bit of an increase of possibilities of this thing coming to the Florida coast, and also you can see it right along the Carolina coast. So there are some possible tracks that take it there. I would ignore this particular line. That's one that's been an outlier the whole time. I mean, it's been doing some weird stuff, and obviously taking it into Western Virginia is not a likely scenario at this time. You can see the possibilities really are in the cone that we showed you. So these monster hurricanes have a mind of their own. Sometimes they don't follow the steering currents that's set up, and really the problem with the storm right now is it doesn't have any significant steering currents. It's been going west because of a ridge of high pressure to the north. That ridge is weakening, so that's why it's slowing down, and it's not sure what it wants to do. And sometimes these things have a mind of their own. So could it continue to drift towards Florida? Absolutely. Will it get pulled to the north? That's still in question. I think eventually it happens. I mean, climatologically that's likely, and we will have a big trough that'll be developing along the east coast of the U.S. as we go into the midweek period, a little trough or a cold front coming through. That's likely to try to draw this storm a little bit farther to the north. So we'll see how things play out. And the fact that all the computer models are pretty much suggesting that turn leads me to believe that's certainly going to happen. 74 degrees in Richmond right now, coming closer to home. We're in the 60s to the northwest, but mostly in the 70s. You go up north, it's a comfortable 65 in Buffalo, 66 in Pittsburgh, 67 out in Chicago. Across the country, we've got 70s and 80s out here, triple digits in the desert southwest. Here were the highs today. Look at Vegas, 110 today. Salt Lake even made it up to 100, so some real heat out west. Some hot weather here in the Tennessee Valley as well. We were pretty comfortable when you think about it. I mean, there was a little bit of humidity out there for the 1st of September, and temperatures made it up close to 90. Nice Labor Day weather, though. Tomorrow is going to be pretty much the same. Overnight, mid and upper 60s. Highs tomorrow, jumping back up into the upper 80s, touching 90 in a few places. So a hot day. If you're thinking about the beach, I showed you this yesterday. I mean, there's some people that have just been hanging around all weekend and thinking, hey, I'll go to the beach for Labor Day. Well, be aware, rip current risk is now high at Virginia Beach through the Outer Banks. So if you are going out that way, it's probably best not to go in the water. Just enjoy the sunshine on the beach. Low 80s for air temperatures with a breeze coming in off the water. There's a 20% chance of an afternoon thunderstorm down at Virginia Beach. Hot weather next couple of days until this cold front arrives. It'll come in Wednesday night into Thursday morning, so that's why our temperatures drop dramatically Thursday and Friday. And right now, next weekend is actually looking really, really nice. So overnight, skies will be partly to variably cloudy. We go into tomorrow and we'll see a mix of sun and clouds, maybe an isolated shower storm. Once again, northwest is where we're focusing our attention, but also a couple of storms may fire down in the Hampton Roads area near Virginia Beach. We go into Tuesday, not much really going on, pretty quiet. Wednesday, you'll see a little line develop here across the mountains. That's the cold front that comes in Wednesday night, slides through the area. We'll jump ahead to Thursday. So the front's right in here by Thursday morning. And here's the moisture from Dorian. Watch as that comes northward. It'll meet up with the front. There's probably going to be a sharp cutoff with this moisture and the rain that falls. So east of I-95 may see some significant rain, while west of 95 may not see virtually anything at all. That looks to be the scenario right now. It's possible, if Dorian curves a little bit more, that most of us just miss out on all of this stuff. So we'll see how that plays out. But certainly coastal areas, Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, Hampton Roads especially, could be getting into some heavy rain. This is Thursday evening at 8 o'clock. You'll see a little heavier rain comes up by Friday morning at 8. Timing is still a little tough here. This may be a little faster, maybe a little slower. I'd say there's a better chance it's a little faster, because with that cold front coming through and the trough developing, it's probably going to kick this thing a little bit farther to the east by Friday. But still the possibility is there for some early morning rain in Richmond and very heavy rain down from Virginia Beach to the Outer Banks. But watch how fast that will move out of the way. Friday afternoon, the sun comes out. This is Saturday with a lot of sunshine. So that's kind of how it plays out. Any effects that are felt here right now, the most likely scenario in terms of time is beginning Thursday afternoon, continuing Thursday night into early Friday, then it moves out. Some folks have been already asking me a little bit about wind. I don't think wind is going to be a major issue for many of us. Coastal areas, different scenario. We may see tropical storm force winds down near Virginia Beach. I wouldn't be surprised if we have some gusty breezes in Richmond, depending on the track. So that's something we're going to have to watch closely. I mean, we're still trying to determine where this thing is going to go in terms of its relation to the coast of Florida. And we got a lot of time to watch it for coming up here. So Nick, what's everybody saying out there?
You know, Mike, we've had a lot of people watching tonight. At one point we had over 800 that were watching our feed. We have so many questions, as you can imagine. Julie says she's just keeping an eye on her hometown from Ohio. Be safe. Chris is watching from Richmond. We've got Jamie from Stanton. This kind of caught me not by surprise, but this one stood out to me. Manny says, as unpredictable this hurricane is, the weathermen said one thing and then the hurricane do another.
Well,
you know, it's one of those things that we reiterate time and time again, that there is the unpredictability of this.
And here's the map where I took the line off. Somebody had put that line back on my graphic. The Hurricane Center doesn't really like us to show the line in the middle because the forecast isn't a specific line. It's a cone of possibilities, and that's why I wanted to take that off and show you guys. So there's the actual track that's forecast, and you can almost be certain that within the first few days, that hurricane is going to end up somewhere in this cone of possibilities. So that does narrow down the forecast a lot. Is it going to be in that specific spot? Maybe not. But certainly it's probably going to be in that cone of possibilities. And that's why the cone widens a little bit as you go out towards 5 days from now. The Hurricane Center forecast is still pretty accurate out to 5 days. Will it be outside this cone? It's not completely impossible, but I'd say chances are in this relatively wide range it's going to be in there. Notice how that cone comes into central Virginia as we get into late Thursday and early Friday morning. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities. It's not likely because climatologically speaking, these things tend to turn. You probably know that if you've been watching storms for years. As we get towards the peak of hurricane season, which is officially next week, and you have a cold front like the one that's coming in midweek, the chances are this thing is going to turn. If we had nothing going on here and say there was the big ridge was still in place here, it might actually shove the storm inland. And we had that problem with Sandy years ago, and several storms have done that, where they sit off the coast and then there's a ridge off the coast and it kind of pushes it back towards the coast. So that's not going to happen with this storm. It's eventually going to make its curve.
We had Jess ask, if some odd reason it keeps shifting west, then goes north, what do you think the winds would be like in Richmond? But you were just saying basically what we just talked about, it might just be like a little bit of a windy day.
Well, if it was to shift, I think what she probably means is shifting west as it comes up the coast. If it came inland, obviously there'd be more of a wind threat here. A lot of that would depend on where it makes landfall, because for it to get up into central Virginia, it's got to make landfall before it gets here. what's really popular is people ask me, are we going to take a direct hit? Is it going to make landfall?
I've seen a few of those in here.
People are asking if landfall is going to be in Richmond. And it's like, well, it can't be. We have too much land before you get to the coast. So that's not going to happen. But, as it comes inland, if you remember, Isabel came inland in North Carolina and then came up towards Richmond. It lost some of its punch, but it still had some good power as it came through here. So that is always a possibility. I mean, you see that really close to Wilmington. If that was to come inland, it would lose its strength by the time it got up into Virginia. It would probably be a tropical storm if. It's certainly not likely, but if. But a tropical storm is, pretty significant still for us. So
Christopher Martin's wondering what caused it to slow down.
Steering currents are disappearing. So that ridge off to the east is weakening and moving away. That's been steering it and kind of pushing it along. Basically, I tell this to a lot of school students when I go and I do talks. The upper atmosphere acts like a traffic cop, the upper level flow, and it tells the surface what to do. So the ridge is kind of saying, go this way. It's directing the storm. When that weakens and it's gone, it's like losing your traffic cop. It doesn't know what to do. And when a storm gets this strong, sometimes it disobeys the traffic cop, number one. And number two, when it doesn't have anything there, it says, I just want to suck up this warm water and I want to get stronger because it's thriving off of this warm water. So it's strengthening and it's liking where it's at right now because there's nothing in its way. So that's kind of what's been going on. The slowing down is sometimes an indicator of a turn. And that's what, again, we're hoping that's what's going to happen here, because if it doesn't turn and it keeps moving very slowly to the west, eventually it hits the Florida Peninsula.
Well, we've got Lindsay saying, y'all, it's too early to tell how or if it will affect us. And interestingly enough, we do have the folks at the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. They've tweeted out tonight that they'll begin starting to meet tomorrow. I think they said it's a yellow. So it kind of gets them into that planning mode just in case for folks like the Eastern Shore or Virginia Beach, that might just
and the challenge
a little bit of a
knowing these things at the right time. It's just like I told you, the hurricane warning is in effect along the Florida coast. That's because we're 36 hours away from this thing getting close to the coast. Emergency managers down there need to know, what do I do? Do we evacuate people? Do we actually take action? The great thing about technology is we've gotten better at this hurricane forecasting. I mean, as someone had mentioned, it's possible it's going to go a little bit different direction, but we've gotten better at it, and so it's enabled us to warn people further in advance. And when you've got populations like we all know along the coast of Florida, the population is astronomical. You can't move them when all of a sudden it looks like, oh my gosh, we're going to get hit in 12 hours. There's no time. So you got to take action earlier, and we'd rather be safe than sorry. So they're going to take some actions in Florida because they now have the hurricane warning in effect. And Virginia emergency managers are meeting for the same reason. They've got to figure out, okay, this is what the latest is. What are the chances of this impacting our area? What do we need to do? And they'll lay out a plan. We won't take action until we need to, but at least they'll have a plan in effect.
Let's see. We have Cecilia's wondering, what are the chances of tornadoes like last year?
Well, last year, that was a situation where the storm center went to the west of us. I'm trying to remember the exact scenario on the weather map, but when you're in the right front quadrant of the storm, that's where your greatest chance of tornadoes is. Doesn't necessarily mean you can't get any tornadoes on other sides, but we're on the back side of this storm, assuming the track verifies. Also, what's going to happen here is it gets up towards Virginia and a little farther north especially, it's going to undergo a transition to what we call an extratropical cyclone, which is your ordinary storm system. There'll be more colder air that's involved. Remember, I talked about the cold front. So this is going to become kind of an ordinary system as opposed to a tropical system. On the backside of the storm, there's going to be drier air coming in. So that is not going to be conducive to any kind of tornado development. I'd say right now, I'd be concerned potentially in the Outer Banks for some tornadoes. Concerned, not alerting at this point, because there's still a chance that that thing goes east of there. But other than that, I think the tornado threat with this is going to hopefully remain relatively low, because of its track a little bit farther to the east.
Jamie says, my family lives from Richmond to the coast, so thank you for keeping me updated. We have Haley Rose watching from South Florida.
Well, South Florida hopefully will be okay by this, because we're, as you can see, like, it's going to go north of Miami for certain, and most of South Florida. Let me bring up that warning map again so you can see where that is. They've got storm surge watches in effect there as well, but the official hurricane warning is Jupiter Inlet up to the Brevard County line. So it's near Jupiter. You go south into Palm Beach and it's just a tropical storm warning, which is still obviously a serious situation, but not what we're talking about with this monster hurricane.
No, what's the yellow there?
The yellow here is Lake Okeechobee.
Oh.
So you can actually see the water. If I took that off, you'd see the water. But that's Lake Okeechobee. That's the tropical storm watch. So even inland, there's a possibility the wind could come in. Now, right now, let me check the latest information, which let me just make sure nothing new has come in. I don't think so. We're still talking the 8 o'clock advisory. The hurricane force winds still the same as I talked about on the news at 6:30. They extend 45 miles from the center. So remember, we showed you that rather small eye. It's a very compact storm. That's what's enabled it to intensify this much. The tropical storm force winds extend outward 140 miles from the center. So that's a reason why we have tropical storm warnings as far south as we do, because this thing gets close to the coast, and all of a sudden you're talking winds going out 140 miles from that, our tropical storm force. That could potentially cover a good chunk of the eastern portion of Florida and even west. I mean, we'll see.
Well, Charlene has an interesting question. What is the possibility of it crossing Florida and going into the Gulf? Didn't see any models
I'm not
that
willing to
look like
rule
that.
anything out, but there is not one computer model that suggests that at this point. I'm not saying that means it's totally out of the realm of possibilities, because as I said, these monster storms do what they want sometimes, and it really doesn't have steering currents. If it doesn't get picked up and pulled north, it could wander. It could wander to the west. It's not totally impossible. Chances are it's probably going to sit there for a while until something comes to move it. But, so I don't want to say zero, but I'd say extremely low chances that it goes straight across and into the Gulf.
Katie says, thanks for all you do. There's no way I could do your job. And then Christopher Martin's wondering, why doesn't the West Coast see hurricanes like we do here on the East Coast?
Wow. That's a good question, which I could elaborate for a long time. We don't have enough time to do that. But the West Coast, think about the water, because hurricanes thrive on warm water. The West Coast, the water temperatures are much, much cooler. So the minute that thing tries to go north, it's just gone. We see, tropical storms or hurricanes flirt with Mexico, and potentially even extreme Southern California can sometimes get skirted by these things, but it just doesn't have a chance to go up the coast because the water's too cold. So
but we have seen storms hit Hawaii. Am I remembering
That's
that
true.
correctly?
Well, Hawaii's farther south, of course. So yeah, they can go out into the Pacific and then impact Hawaii, but they're not going to come up like, say, Seattle's not at risk like New York City or Boston potentially. Not that it's common necessarily in New York and Boston or New England, although this has potential of kind of riding up the coast going east, and it's not necessarily going to hit New England, but it may not be that far away in all the realms of possibilities.
And we do see these, like in Japan, for example, but it's just called cyclones versus a hurricane. Typhoons.
Yeah, so they're all the same things. They're really cyclones, but in every ocean basin, we name them something different. And don't ask me why, because I'm not the one who decided that. But some basins call them something different. But it's the plot again of all the models. So it kind of curves to the right, and then notice how northeasterly track actually takes it east of New England. So it's off the coast, but still, West Coast storms would not be able to survive that because the water's just way too cold.
Well, Amber says, I hope the storm misses us. I have clinicals on Saturday. LOL.
Well, Saturdays, we're in the clear. Saturday looks beautiful, by the way. Saturday looks nice and dry, sunshine, lower humidity. Temperatures in the morning maybe in the 50s and then rising into the low and mid 80s in the afternoon. So Saturday looks really nice at this point.
After seeing the temperature line graph, I'm super excited. I'm also curious, like, I am not I have a bit of a difficulty retaining weather.
You do?
But the thing that's interesting to me in all this is the cold front coming through. It almost seems like it kind of pushes it in a way. Like, it's amazing to me just from a novice understanding that it's almost like these two big energy systems
right. It's
coming
together.
It's a
little bit more the upper level effects, but certainly that, yes, to answer your question. And the cold front, it is pretty neat. And this time of the year, you do get that fall-like air that comes and kind of puts the kibosh, shall we say, on all these tropical systems that try to come north.
Mike Hicks says, I hope it's gone before the Gators game Saturday. LOL,
Yes.
Go Gators. That should definitely be gone by then.
Yes, for certain.
And then Lindsay and Shaletha, they really did not like that one rogue blue line that we saw.
Yeah, don't worry about that. I don't know what the deal with that, but it's been an outlier all along.
And this
we
is
probably ought to take that model off the graphic so that you don't get crazy over that.
This is kind of like maybe where we can end our questioning, but we've had quite a few people ask about South Carolina. I've kind of been saving it because where they are, we're looking over there. So do you think for the U.S., other than, obviously all of this area will see impacts to a certain extent?
I honestly, personally, after looking at a lot of the data, I don't like to get too much of my thought interjected here because the Hurricane Center is watching this so closely and they are looking at so much data, and obviously they specialize in that. But my concern is the lack of the steering currents and this thing turning north, but then not really being able to be directed out. That will depend on the timing of this trough and cold front. And if it doesn't get here soon enough, then this thing sits here. So, this is dangerously close to the South Carolina, North Carolina border. The left side of the core of the hurricane would be on shore. Maybe not the eye wall itself, but you'd have some pretty intense bands of rain and a lot of wind here, especially the Outer Banks. If this track verifies, think about this. This is the direction of flow around the storm, so you're going to have a tremendous surge in the Outer Banks if this verifies, even if it is a Cat 2. You're still talking 105 mile an hour winds and a lot of storm surge for the Outer Banks. So I'm kind of thankful this is happening after Labor Day, because we've had a lot of people at the beaches. A lot of people would say, I'm not leaving the beach. Because it's after Labor Day, hopefully everybody will heed the warnings and get away from the beach. But this is a storm surge problem for Florida, all the way up through the southeast coast here and the Carolinas and even Virginia Beach, just because of the nature of this track, and then eventually it's going to hook right. We're talking about, hopefully minimal impacts in Richmond and Central Virginia for those of our viewers, but coastal areas, regardless of where this ends up, unless it takes this turn, are going to have a substantial impact. Even if it ends up out here, you're still going to have some high surf and issues with the coastal areas. But obviously, if it comes anywhere in from this outer edge of possibilities, you're going to have some pretty good storm surge, really all the way up the southeast and mid-Atlantic coast.
And Patricia's pointing out there have been several, she's saying, hurricanes around Labor Days past. Feels almost like deja vu.
The Labor Day hurricane back in 1935 was also just about as powerful. It's interesting, before we were on here, Nick and I were talking a little bit, and I was looking at some of the statistics on Dorian, and it is the most powerful hurricane ever east of Florida and north of the Caribbean. So where it is, it's unbelievably powerful. It's the most powerful hurricane to come through the Northwest Bahamas. I hope the pictures from the Northwest Bahamas aren't as bad as I visualize in my mind right now, but knowing what's going through there tonight, it's a real scary thought. I think parts of the Northwest Bahamas have the potential of completely being obliterated. think about the storm surge, 20 to 25 feet.
Well, we know ABC News has a crew there, and it really did make me nervous based on some of the reports that were coming out. It's just so much water, and that storm surge is what we always talk about, and that just
Yeah, they're
so
talking
scary.
about Hurricane Center is warning about 18 to 23 foot surges above normal tide levels right on Grand Bahama Island. So, I mean, that's just almost unthinkable when you try to picture that. Storm surge, even with where we are predicting this storm to go, assuming it goes and takes that right-hand turn for Florida from the Flagler-Volusia County line to Lantana, is expected to be a 4 to 7 foot surge. That's still a pretty good surge, folks, for a storm that's that far off the coast. And north of Deerfield Beach up to Lantana, 2 to 4 feet above normal tides. So possibly 30 inches of rain in the northwest Bahamas. Florida looking at least 3 to 6 inches of rain along the Florida coast. Potentially, they even put southeastern Virginia in the advisory, mentioning that 2 to 4 inches and isolated 6-inch totals are possible in southeast Virginia. And that's way up the road from where the hurricane is now, but they wanted to get the word out. And coastal Carolina could be looking at potentially a foot or more of rain. So, you know, even with this right-hand turn, which people have been trying to say, oh, it's not going to be as bad, I'd caution before thinking it's not going to be as bad. Yeah, it's not going to be devastating like if it came on shore, but it still could have a tremendous impact. Friends and family down in the Jacksonville area have said over and over again how Matthew was such a monster storm. And I still remember a few years ago when we were predicting Hurricane Matthew, and we were really nervous about northern Florida because it looked like it was going to come on shore. And everybody was breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief because it stayed offshore, but it still pounded the Jacksonville area. So, I mean, you know, just because it's going to be offshore doesn't mean you can just let your guard down. So.
Well, we'll go ahead and let you start getting ready for CBS 6 News at 11. Is 11 o'clock the next time the Hurricane Center does their update?
There should be a new advisory in, so my map will change a little bit. I've been trying to see if they have put out the newest advisory, but they have not. So unfortunately, I can't show it to you right now. But we'll have it on the news at 11, so that's about 17 minutes away now. Hope you'll tune in, and I will be here filling in tomorrow night as well. So I know, Nick, you're probably not here tomorrow. You get Labor Day off, don't you?
Yes, and it's also one of my normal days off.
Right. So hopefully somebody will be here. We can do.
Leah would love to help do a Facebook Live.
Leah will be back. She's been with us here on the weekend, here and there. So we'll try to do an update tomorrow evening with you guys, and I'll keep you posted on my page. So hopefully Nick can tag my page, and you can check with all of us here at CBS 6 as we go through the week. I would assume we're probably going to be doing some coverage of the storm as it comes towards the Outer Banks, assuming this track continues. So there'll be a lot to be seen as we go through the course of the next several days. So thanks for checking in. Stay safe and have a happy Labor Day.